Alright, so I believe this is a UK production that most likely takes place in the 80s. I don't think they ever specify, but Thatcher is in office, so that's probably the era. Anyway, why does the era even matter? Well, because the backdrop of the movie is kind of important. Because the story takes place around the time that these so-called video nasties grew in popularity. Largely because of VHS technology, and if you haven't heard the term video nasty before, it just refers to these cheap and often very gory horror movies, essentially terrible B-movies. But just like with rap music and video games later on, the media and the government get very concerned about this phenomena. And they try to pin all the world's problems on these movies under the guise of protecting the children. So this is the kind of environment the story takes place in, and we follow a literal censor. A woman whose job it is to watch all these movies, take notes and tell the producers what needs to be cut for the movie to eventually get released. Which, as one might guess, is the job for someone who can actually tolerate watching a lot of gore and violence. And this woman seems to indeed be very good at her job, but all is not perhaps as it might seem. It does turn out that she is sort of battling some demons from her own past as well, and things sort of develop from there on in ways that are sometimes rather interesting. But at other times not that interesting, and the thing with this movie is that, well, not a whole lot actually happens here, and for a movie that's like an hour and 20 minutes, it's sort of a brooding, slow burn that I feel like takes a while to really get going. But to its credit, it is doing it purposefully, and it's trying to build something here. Build some tension and slowly and gradually build up this character and her struggles. And while this is a very different movie from Saint Maud, it actually gave me very similar vibes. And funnily enough, and I guess this is sort of a semi-spoiler if you've seen Saint Maud, but this one goes with a very similar ending to that movie. Eerily similar actually. And I wasn't going to look into it any further because I knew this didn't have the same director or writer, and I wasn't going to accuse them of ripping it off since these movies were released somewhat close to each other, so they shouldn't really have influenced each other, but I decided to type in Saint Maud Censor into Google, expecting to find nothing, and move on. But to my surprise I did find something. Both movies have the same editor, Mark Towns. So I guess that explains a thing or two, and turns out I wasn't just seeing ghosts, so to speak. But yeah, anyway, I liked the ending of Saint Maud, and I'm gonna say I liked this one maybe even better. Whereas Saint Maud did it brilliantly with just a frame or two on screen. This one took a slightly more drawn-out approach and basically turned this into a dark comedy for the last few minutes. And I would say that was probably my favorite part of the movie because I just love that kind of stuff. But the rest of the movie, it wasn't bad, but it just felt like it needed something. A bit of spice, just something to give it some punch, because as it is, it did feel a tad bit bland at times. But I mean, I still liked it well enough. I'd say it worked and accomplished what it set out to do. And Niamh Algar in the lead here does a very good job as well, to be fair. But is this one going to stick with me for a long time? Probably not. And if it does, I would say it's probably mostly because of the ending and how much I enjoyed that part. But it's still a decent film and I didn't really have that many issues with it, so I think I'm gonna give this one a low 6. Boop. And if you're a fan of slightly more psychological horror than just straight up gore, you might want to check this one out. Or you know, you could just also skip it, after all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel because that would be fantastic.